Hey guys, my name's Albert and welcome to our Lead the Charge video series. Join me as I chat to industry experts within the EV sector as we cover topics such as fleet, carbon footprint and charging. Now sit back, relax, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have learned at least one thing that you can take away. Well, hey Alex, thanks for joining us on our Lead the Charge interviews. It's great to have you. It's a great area, for us, battery testing and something we haven't covered yet. So I really appreciate you coming on. If you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself, a bit about your background, how you come into the world of EVs, battery testing, all that kind of stuff.
Hi Albert, I'm Alex Johns. I'm not young, so I've been around quite a few different industries over the years, but probably spent about 20 years now in mobility in one way or another. So I initially designed some mobility models around shared mobility, which got taken forward by a couple of large manufacturers. And then that sort of led me towards the taxi industry, where I ended up running an electric taxi trial at Gatwick Airport, where we ran 10 Teslas doing about 100,000 miles a year on each vehicle to see what would happen. So we ran 5 Model S's up to 300,000 miles, and they'd only degraded by 18%, which was quite incredible. I joined Altelium 4 years ago. Altelium is a rare beast, really. We're from the insurance industry, but also from the battery industry. And so we bring together sort of data, battery knowledge and insurance knowledge to do battery testing and then warranties associated with that.
Awesome. So at Altelium, what does your role look like?
I'm the partnership lead, which is sort of a glorified business development term. But basically, it represents the fact that our customers or anyone we work with on the demand side, I work with, but it's not a quick relationship. We tend to have long, deep relationships, and so I kind of get to know the people. Usually know when their birthdays are and everything else. So I'm on the demand side.
And then Altilium as a business, what's the most exciting part about working for Altilium?
We're a young business, and we're trying to do something which isn't really being done. And so there's one or two battery testers out there, but no one making that link with extended warranties. So I suppose the biggest thing at a sort of conceptual level is we try and reduce people's anxiety or give them confidence around an EV battery, because people do get pretty wound up about EVs and especially the batteries. They don't have enough knowledge, and we kind of provide both that knowledge and then put our money where our mouth is and say, okay, we'll back that up with a financial product which protects it, i.e. An extended warranty. So yeah, it's nice to play that part in the energy transition, because if the second-hand market, which is where we play, doesn't work, then the new market doesn't work. And so if we want to see the whole thing unfold, you need a bit of this. We're not the full answer, but we're a piece of the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, amazing. And it's such a, battery testing is such it's not, as you said, not lots of people are doing it. It's such a new thing. And there's so many people who do have that worry, and it gives people that peace of mind. And, and having something that we've gone from ICE vehicles, people are so used to their engines and their engine lights to where people just ignore them. You get an engine light on, some people just ignore it. People become so comfortable and so familiar, and it's new territory, right? Being in battery testing and driving electric vehicles, though we've got so many on the road, I think there's now over 1 million on the road. It's a whole new area. So, with Altilium's mission, how is it contributing to the growth of battery technology sector and battery testing sector, and what's kind of the mission going forward for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really an enabler. So we're there to help enable the energy transition through giving that confidence, through giving that information, through giving that financial support, if you like, in the form of, or financial security in the form of a warranty.
With battery technology itself, can you just give us some insight as to how it actually works, what it actually looks like? Because I'm sure it's not just as simple as let's just test the battery, or it may be, but how does it actually work, and what does it look like when I come in with my car and I want it tested? What does that look like?
Well, there's two basic ways of doing it. There's either you plug in a little gadget, a little OBD, normal sort of looking diagnostic gadget, plugs into the OBD2 port in the vehicle. The other way is for connected vehicles, where we do an API connection. So basically, we log into the vehicle, and we monitor a charge event. So that one actually requires a bit of a charge, only a 25% charge, but the OBD just reads in a minute or two. So it's a very, very quick test. Um, but with both of them, it's a little bit like a swan. It's kind of easy on the surface. The reports all look the same and are very comparable and so on. But underneath, the manufacturers with their makes and models, they all offer different information. So some of them make an estimation of the state of health of a battery um, with varying qualities. And so we will just read that and then look at the quality on that over the many, many, many tests we've done and potentially make adjustments if we think they're necessary. Others don't give a state of health sort of estimation at all. So, but they have other data inside the battery which we can pull through and then kind of mash up, as it were, to create a state of health. So you don't see any of this. It's all under the surface. It's kind of the swan paddling like mad, but it's what our platform does. It's why not everyone's doing it because it's quite difficult.
So what are the key things you're looking for? So you're plugging into the car and it's taking a couple of minutes, but what are the key things you're looking for? So if I'm getting my battery test results back, for instance, like what are the key things when you're looking to put a an insurance policy on top of that and saying, well, look,
Sure.
we'll give you a warranty. What things do you look at and how is that broke down?
So the key metric that we're creating or we're reading or interpreting is state of health, and that's state of health on the capacity of the battery. So if it starts off as a sort of 80 kilowatt hour battery, how many kilowatt hours has it got now? Because kilowatt hours is a measure of the energy that can be stored. And then, of course, if you think about it, if you need so much energy per mile, then obviously there's a relationship between the energy stored and the range you get. And we do know that everybody, when they come to look at an EV, their first question always is, well, what's its range? So what we're attempting to do is, well, what we are doing is we're answering that question. And then on our reports, we make it incredibly visual so anyone can understand it really, even if you don't know much about batteries. And on the range, we break that down. We say, okay, well, what's a typical range? And then we
Yep.
say, well, what's a sort of warm weather range and what's a cold weather range? Because a lot of people know that the cold weather does affect battery performance quite a bit. We also break it down by highway and city driving. So actually, your range is higher at low speeds. So EVs quite like cities where ICE vehicles don't. They don't like the stop start. But ICE vehicles do like it, partly because of the regen braking. Whenever they brake, they regen some energy. But also when they're sitting doing nothing, they haven't got an engine running, so they just
Yeah.
sit there and do nothing. They're quite happy doing that. So, but if you're going along pretty fast on a motorway or something, you've got a lot of resistance from the air you're pushing through, and so that tends to use a bit more energy. So we have all that broken down on the report, just to give somebody who might be wanting to buy a vehicle or is potentially wanting to sell a vehicle, just that level of knowledge. And in fact, you end up with more knowledge than you'd have about an ICE vehicle. If I've got an old diesel, and a while ago I had to change one of the injectors on it. There's no report that I would have got if I'd just bought it saying number three injector's a bit wobbly. That the pressure in the engine or anything like that, you don't really get much information on. All you get is the mileage and the age, and maybe has it got a service history or not. This is going a whole step further than that with an electric battery. So we're going from a position where people knew less than an ICE vehicle to perhaps where they'll end up knowing more than an ICE vehicle.
So that really breaks it down for you, doesn't it? And as you said, a lot of it's education, as you said, because people just don't realize it's a lifestyle change, and it's a whole mindset shift when you buy an EV. It's not just a case of, well, I'm in this vehicle now, let me get into this one. You kind of, as you said, the education just really isn't there, and this is basically helping to break that down for people. So when they're purchasing, they're understanding what their car is capable of from the beginning.
Yeah, if you think about it, that we've had over 100 years of getting familiar with ICE vehicles, and so they've reached pretty much every society and every part of society, and we all know a bit about them, even if we think we don't. We're used to it, that we drive it for a bit, we go to a fuel station, we have to put a nozzle in, and blah blah blah. We know how it works. We just we're learning all this from scratch with electric. So yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying to help.
So just on the back of that, so I don't know if you can like touch on any of like the key projects you guys are working on, and that you're kind of looking at.
You mean all those secret things I'm not supposed to talk about? Well, the biggest one obviously is rolling out. You know, the whole industry is fairly young. You know, we see it taking up, I don't know, 15% of new car sales and maybe three or something of old car sales or something like that. Um, but that's still quite a small percentage. So for all of us in the industry, it's all about scaling up and rolling out and getting our place in the market. So that's kind of obviously a big thing. We are looking at also new routes to market in order to reach more people more easily. And we're looking at the next generation of the warranties. And always there's a bit of an arms race as well, that more and more EVs come out. And as they come out, we've got to figure out how to test them because they're not all the same.
And that's funny because you hear people say that. I've heard some ridiculous videos of people like all EVs don't work or all EVs are bad. Or it's like you've tested one vehicle that actually works so different to this vehicle. That such statement, simple statement, it just again shows the lack of education. Cars are so different. You can't make that just off of one vehicle. Didn't like
Yeah.
this one, so therefore this one is. I heard someone compare once, say, "Well, I've driven a Vauxhall Corsa, therefore Lamborghinis are rubbish because I didn't like this. I didn't like this petrol car, so therefore, I mean, that's the comparison you're making, right? Just because this ICE vehicle isn't good, it means this one isn't good.
Well, it's kind of clickbait, isn't it? People love a bit of a generalization, and they also like to have whatever their own view is reinforced. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, there's huge variety. You can go from a Nissan Leaf, which has been around for a long time. They had no thermal management on those batteries, so although the car was bulletproof and the battery technology in terms of the cells and the chemistries was absolutely fine, they made a choice not to put thermal management on it, which has meant those batteries haven't lasted very well. They were also quite small initially. They did make them bigger later on.
Mm.
So you can't really compare that with a Tesla Model S, which was 4 or 5 times the price when it was new, with fantastic thermal management, a much bigger battery, and so on. Completely different beasts. So you wouldn't
Yeah,
really expect
100%.
to compare them.
That's the thing, isn't it? They're just completely different vehicles and completely different batteries. So even when you're testing them, they're completely different batteries that you're testing. And some of the newer vehicles with the new batteries that are coming out, I mean, I'd imagine for someone like Altelium, it's going to be ever evolving because batteries are ever changing and ever, being very different. Even when you're looking at like a Tesla Model 3 from 2019 to the brand new Tesla Model 3 now, completely different car.
Well,
So,
half the Model 3s, I mean, you're absolutely right. Half the Model 3s now and the Model Ys have lithium iron phosphate batteries, which is
yeah.
quite a different battery, different energy density, will have a little bit less range. But not many people realize that the cycle life, so the number of charges and discharges you can do until you get to 70% state of health, on a nickel manganese cobalt or a nickel cobalt aluminium battery, which are the other Tesla batteries, they'll maybe do 1,000 to 1,500 cycles, something like that. Your LFP batteries, your lithium iron phosphates, they'll do 3 to 6,000. So that's where you
Crazy
may have
difference.
had, yeah, huge difference. So that where you've heard the idea of the million-mile battery, there's some of those good. The original ones, if you get 3, 4, 500,000, that's really, really good. But you wouldn't expect to go much further. But lithium iron phosphate, why not? You could get potentially that.
Yeah, and it's brilliant with that as well because you look at buying a 100,000 mile EV to a 100,000 mile petrol car, you can't compare the two.
I'd, I'd go for the EV every day.
Yeah, hundred
But
percent.
depending on which one, I wouldn't buy a 100,000 mile Nissan Leaf, but a Tesla with decent thermal management, I wouldn't
Yeah,
hesitate.
yeah, exactly that. And again, comes down to education. So, just looking at the battery technology, then, just while we're on that, what would you say is the biggest challenge that the biggest challenges we're facing in battery technology at the moment when it comes to testing?
That Yeah, that they're all different, and just getting access to them. So it's interesting that the market goes, oh, can you test the new this, the new that, or whatever? And actually, it doesn't really matter because until they start appearing on the second-hand market,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah,
they'll people think of the latest model, but they kind of can relax about that one for 6 months or a year because it's not really going to appear on the second-hand market in any volume.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it's they're they're all different and they all present their own individual challenges. So I think I'd be getting way too nerdy to go into the detail of that. But yeah, it's get access to those new vehicles because we need access to them to be able to test them.
yeah.
Is a bit of a challenge.
So then, in terms of like, saying 6 months to a year, we're saying, these batteries, they're not going to come through second-hand markets till then. And even at that point, they're still under the original warranty, right? So there is time. So how do you see the battery market evolving over the next 5 years? Where do you see that going? How do you see that changing? Because as you said, we look at an old Nissan Leaf to a brand new Tesla, battery technology is completely different. How do you see that evolving over the next 5 years and where that's going?
Well, I think it's just going to mature along with the whole of the market. And so we're going to see a little bit less volatility in people's attitudes and secondhand prices because the secondhand prices to date have been incredibly volatile, depending on whether a few sort of car companies have had a demand issue or whether they've changed their pricing on the new cars. I think that'll settle down, and I think pricing will become more a function of the battery health. And so I think it'll really matter to measure it. And I think people will demand it. They're starting to already. I mean, I certainly know if I went to buy a secondhand EV now, I wouldn't buy it without a battery test. There's no way. Because it's not just a matter of age and mileage. It's a matter of how that one's been looked after, simple natural variability, and maybe a little bit about the design in the first place. So, I do my research, target the models I wanted, but insist on a test.
So then on that, I mean, we've covered it slightly, but I'm going to ask the question a bit more direct. Um, what are the benefits of having your battery tested?
Well, simply you'll know how much of the original capacity you've got left. And so you can then and what we've done is also take another step because if I said okay you've got I don't know 3-year-old Tesla Model 3 there and it's got 94% state of health left, you go, oh, that's great, Alex. Is that good? No one really knows. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
what we've done is created just a simple dial of whether saying that's really good or really bad or about right. And that works really well. That then gives people that context of okay, this is a good one, or this one is probably one to perhaps pass over and let somebody else get at a discount price because it's not so good. So that this is where I think that this it will affect pricing going forward. And I've heard quite a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'm not sure I want to do that because what if I've got a bad one? It won't sell." And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, do you want to hold back the market for the vast majority, which are kind of in good shape, for the sake of one that's a bit of a lemon? Actually, what you want to do is identify that lemon. There is a market for it, but it'll be at a knockdown price. But stop holding back all the better ones for the sake of one or two bad ones.
Yeah, and I mean, it's an interesting as we said, it's new territory for people. It's
Yeah.
not something it's very new, and I think it's something that's going to be demanded more and more as time goes on. And finding the right placement as to where that battery should be tested and where it needs to be tested. I think it's just unfamiliar ground for people, right? It's something that
I,
people need to
I think it's
familiarize
really,
themselves with.
I think it's really helpful that we've chatted before about this of when to test the battery. What stage in the sort of life cycle of the vehicle, or even in the used cars sort of ecosystem, where do you test it? And I think that pretty much everyone the vehicle touches would rather know the state of health of the battery than not. And so my general view is test as early as possible and then let that test go with the car. So whether it's at the auction, the dealer or whatever, or even a private sale, but have that test. But the extended warranty, which is the other bit we do with it, there are various options you could have on that. And so that's very much, I think, up to the final buyer. So that I think should be offered as late as possible in the ecosystem, and the test as early as possible, but to carry through. But that's it's still we're finding our way through. well, we're happy to supply it at any stage, but I think that's probably the best for building the most confidence.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably see the battery testing like really take shape over the next 2 to 3 years. I think it will become, especially as more and more people are forced down that avenue
Yeah.
to buy an EV. We're heading that way. I mean, what Labour do, we don't know whether they're actually going to go back to 2030 or not, but the demand then will increase again. So, what recent technological advancements in battery testing do you find most exciting? Because I'm sure since you've been doing it over the past however long, you've seen some changes and changes that are coming. What's the most exciting part about that specific area?
Well, it's again, it's the whole market is maturing, so you're finding different horses for courses. So if you want to do a test at a dealership or an auctioneer's or something, you've got very little time with the vehicle. You haven't got time to drive it, charge it, anything like that. So you want to plug in and be quick. So the
Yep.
OBDs are working really well with that. But you realise that isn't a priority for just your domestic user. So if your domestic user has an over-the-air vehicle so that you can communicate with the web, then you can do a remote test with a bit of a charge overnight. And that isn't a big deal because they're not sort of, they haven't got to do 10 of them in the next 5 minutes or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's just starting to get those differences of depending on who you're dealing with in the market and what their priorities are, that you can offer different ways of doing it. And increasingly, we're trying to offer both options. So at the moment, the API route, the over the air one, is for the Teslas, but we're going to add on lots of makes and models onto that, and the OBDs is for the rest. But some of those, but actually we can do the OBD on the Teslas as well now. So we're we're adding more variety to the market depending on what the market actually wants.
Yeah, that's great, and it's what it needs as well, right? I think the more stuff there is, and the more comfortable people can be, the better. So,
Yeah.
which brings us nicely, really, into the next question. What advice would you give to someone, firstly, who's looking to purchase an electric vehicle? I can imagine what your response will be for that, but what advice would you give to someone who's looking to purchase an electric vehicle for the first time, whether it be new or used? And
Yeah.
then, what advice would you give to someone who's specifically looking at used and who's looking to, invest or go down the battery technology route? So, a couple of questions chucked into one there.
Well, if you're buying a new EV, um, uh, as ever, look at the reviews and so on. And I, I've tried quite a lot of EVs, as you can imagine. And I suppose one of the metrics that I look at is the efficiency. So no one really cared at first about efficiency, which is the equivalent of miles per gallon, if you like, in an ICE vehicle. But it varies massively. You can get about four miles for a kilowatt hour in a Model 3 or something like that, but you're struggling to get three in an equivalent Audi or something like that, or the Volkswagen, which it's similar to. The And that gives you an idea, if you like, of the underlying technology quality. That how much have they really tried to do this, or have they just tried to solve the problem by sticking in a bigger battery? So I'd probably look at that for a new vehicle. For a used vehicle, you know what I'm going to say. You absolutely got to ask for a test, and then think about, okay, so if that one's only 3 years and 30,000 miles old, but it's dropped 20%, oh my God, that sounds awful. Just apply a bit of common sense. You may not know that much about it, but get a report and then think about it and think, okay, also, what do I need against what is available? So if you actually only ever just go around town and down to the shops, do you really need a 400-mile range vehicle? You're going to pay for a lot for the range, but what do you really need? So yeah, that would be my sort of general advice.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because first thing people look at is how much range does this car have? Well, how much,
Yeah.
my question, and I used to get my team, so I used to be a store manager at Tesla, and I used to say to my team, one of the questions we need to be asking is, what's your normal day-to-day driving like? Because if I'm just doing the school run, it's a 5 mile round trip.
Yeah.
Well, you don't need to be purchasing the 300 mile range car. You can be looking at the 250, or, you what's actually going to suit your needs. And that was the great thing about Tesla, is we didn't upsell. We were never the company that upsold. We were always trying to get you in the car that best suited your needs. And how often are
Well,
you actually doing a 250-mile trip? Like all
we
of that kind of stuff.
You see, I think Tesla got it right in the sense that people do have a psychological need that they could do that trip to see their aged parents or to go
Yeah,
to that holiday or whatever. And psychologically, you want that.
yeah,
And so Tesla went with that from the beginning. They've always been pretty high on the range.
yeah,
And where, if you look at the Leaf or the Mazda MX-30, Mazda MX-30, brilliant car, but they put in a 30 kilowatt hour battery saying, oh, people don't really need to go more than 100
yeah,
miles. Psychologically, they really do. And so it didn't
yeah,
sell. And they've had to withdraw it early from the market because it just wouldn't sell. So
yeah,
you've got to work with the psychology a bit as well. But you're absolutely right. If you dig into it, and their other car is a, I don't know, Mercedes estate with 600-mile range, and they're going to use that for the holiday anyway, well, then why would you want another one with a long range?
yeah, exactly that. And even with the charging network, the way it's going and the way it's growing, there's lots of chargers out there. It's estimated that there's actually 1 million chargers in the UK when you take into account home charging and work charging. So there's plenty of charging options out there, and again, it's a mindset, and it's a lifestyle that you kind of, I say this, I probably say this on every single lead the charge interview I do, but when I had my ICE vehicle, I'd stick a fiver in. I don't know how much fuel costs these days. I've not been in one for ages, but stick a fiver in, got 40 miles, and for me, I was winning. I was young. I was like 40 miles, perfect. Get me everywhere I need to go. Stick a fiver in every time I needed to. But now, if I get to 40 miles, I'm thinking, where do I need to charge? And it's not even. It's just ingrained into the way I do life, and I'm thinking about charging, and it's not an issue, and it's not something that I'm burdened by. It's just I'm now wired very differently. Um, Wake
We're
up every
getting
morning.
older, Albert.
I know, yeah, I know, and I feel it as well. I feel it, and you know what? It's as well, like with the younger, it's coming off topic again, but like my kids, I took them to one of those like play cities, and they got petrol stations there, and you with a little car, and you put your car in, and you go. My son gets in the little car with his feet, goes along, goes to the petrol station, the little kids' petrol station, puts it in, and walks off. It's like, Daddy, I'm going to the coffee shop. Other parents are looking at me like, your kid's mad. Why has he left the petrol? But for him, he's charging the vehicle. He doesn't even realize you can put petrol in vehicles. Sorry, gone off
Exactly.
topic slightly. That's got nothing to do with battery testing, but the world is changing. It's completely
It
changing.
is changing fast.
Yeah, very
Some,
fast.
something something I'd like to touch on is dealing with fear, because we've talked about attitudes, but I've been spending more time with the older EV customers, and the ones, they get really generous warranties from the manufacturers on the battery. It gets usually out to about 8 years, but when it comes out of that, if you think about it, again, we'll use the Tesla example because that's most of the old vehicles. But a Tesla Model S will be under £20,000 at about 8 years old, maybe 18, 17, something like that. But if you had to replace the battery, it might be about 20 grand. So the battery's worth more than the car. And Tesla owners are incredibly well educated, and they have the Tezzy app and the Teslify and all these different things. But they're still terrified that, oh my God, it's a bit like, you carry insurance for your house burning down, but you don't expect it to burn down. But you know that if it did, you wouldn't be able to afford to
For
fix it.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people are really wanting some kind of protection when that battery gets older, and that's where we've really stepped in. That we've come up with a range of extended warranties dependent on the results of the battery test. And if you turn around to someone and say, well, would you like a 20 grand bill? Possibly. Or would you rather pay 1,200, 1,500, whatever it happens to be for their particular package for a
Yeah.
couple of years extended warranty? It becomes a no-brainer. And that's something that we think is going to really, really take off in the next few years, because you can look at the market 8 years ago, you know how many sold, and it's quite small numbers compared with now, but it grows really fast because that's what the market's done over the last
Yeah.
8 years. So that's a really important one. And we're not just doing Teslas, we're doing all the makes and models that we can test.
Yeah, that's a great comparison, actually. You don't expect your house to burn down, but you've always got the insurance in place. It's just a normal thing to do, right? Um,
Yeah.
and the battery's the heart of the car. It's the biggest part of the car, and it's ultimately the thing that keeps the car alive, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so, I'm just gonna have one more question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Don't mind, Alex. Being the world you're in, it's a very niche market at the moment. There's not lots and lots of people doing what you guys are doing. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to join your world, who wants to be involved in, they're excited and passionate about battery testing? What advice would you give to the person looking to join your world?
Two things. Firstly, communicate clearly. It's a really, really technical subject, and try and think of ways of explaining it to people who know nothing about it, because otherwise everyone switches off. So, firstly, communicate clearly. And the second thing is follow the money. Where does this actually matter? So it matters in the resale business because a vehicle with a battery test is going to be worth more than one without. So where
Yeah.
can you add value? But then start thinking about the commercial applications. Where does it really matter to know the health of a battery? Where can you turn that into financial benefit? And the world changes very fast, so I'm not going to attempt to answer that question because my answer today will probably be wrong in a few months' time when this might be seen online. So yeah, communicate clearly and follow the money.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Like, we genuinely appreciate you coming on. It's such a hot topic. It's such an area, a grey area. People don't really know what's happening. So for your insight and your input is invaluable. So we really, really appreciate you coming on. And thank you for your time.
No problem at all. Thanks a lot.